Welcome to today's Destination Unknown. I'm your host, Alyssa Hall. Today I wanted to talk about the end of the 10 days of awe, which we began talking about last week when we talked about Rosh Hashanah. So, Rosh Hashanah is the first of these 10 days, which are considered some of the highest, most holy days in the Judaic calendar, in the Hebrew calendar. And when you're looking at these days, they call the end day, the 10th day, which is Yom Kippur, which is today's topic, the most holy of those. So during this time, what's happening and how is it observed and what does it mean for someone who may or may not follow Jewish faith is what I wanted to talk about today. As I've mentioned a lot here on the channel, I find it really fascinating to look at other religions, other cultures, other time periods, and really begin to borrow any wisdom that might resonate. And then that's what I want to do here is to share some of those ideas so that you can decide for yourself, do they resonate for you as well or not? So there was a period of time where I was studying a lot of Kabbalistic, which is Judaic based mystic knowledge that is embedded in some of the more occult knowledge that's out there and books of study. There's tons written on it. We've touched on it briefly. We'll be coming back to it a bit more. But yeah, so that subject in and of itself is kind of its own subgenre. But when you're looking at this, you can't just pick and choose. To me, it's important to look at the culture as a whole. And so when you're dealing with what they call within that culture, the most holy of the holy days, or the Sabbath of Sabbaths, as some have put it. When speaking of Yom Kippur, of course, we want to give that some time and some recognition as to what the faith believes, what the holiday represents, and again, how can we represent or how can we celebrate that? So, the holiday itself, it is so at the beginning, at the Rosh Hashanah marks the new year, and that's the beginning of the 10 days of awe. But at the Yom Kippur, that is when you have your last chance, so to speak, to fully atone and make amends for all of your wrongdoings, all of the transgressions from the previous year. This allows you to start fresh, so to speak, so that you're able to come at your new year completely clean and ready, clean spiritually. And that's also represented in different ways with some of the ritual work we're going to talk about next. But the idea of kind of using this day as a reset, as a way to face and atone for the wrongdoings of the past, to me, that's really important. One thing that really resonates for me, to segue for a second, is the fact that when we talk about Yom Kippur, again and again, it's called the Day of Atonement. So let's talk for a second about what the word atonement really means. It means to make amends for your wrongdoings and to therefore pay them back with reparations, either by actions, words. Those deeds are the recognition. So it's not just, gosh, yeah, I did a bad thing. I shouldn't have done that. Oh, well, I'll move on. It's recognizing it to the person who might have suffered from the actions that you're perpetrating, that were your wrongdoing. So if you can take the responsibility to try to then heal that relationship, make the amends by either showing reparations, that might be for someone who's had a difficulty in their partnership with their partner, in their relationship, they might want to take a responsibility for whatever the issue is, discuss ways together. So have a discussion with that partner so that they're informed and involved, and then come up with a plan of action together that's going to help make amends for those wrongdoings, whatever they might be. That's an example of atonement in action. So atonement isn't an easy out, and I respect that. If it's something that you're wanting to really remove from the slate, so to speak, of your consciousness, of feeling that psychic guilt or karmic guilt, carrying the weight of that, then you have to fully and completely embrace it, accept it, and change it in the now, is the idea. And by the way, you can still hear I am getting through some allergies. I'm a little croaky, but we're just going to ignore that and keep going. So that's the point of Yom Kippur is we are now reaching the end of these 10 days where the next year we're about to God seals the fate of the next year based on our atonement. Have we made amends? Have we spent time in prayer and having a spiritual amendment as well as doing physical acts and taking a ways to take again atonement for what you might have done in the past year that you wish to have forgiveness for? Had to think for a second. So a few other ways that Yom Kippur is celebrated. These are most often the ones that are seen as kind of the tenets, something that you would always do, never do on Yom Kippur if you're observing it. So the fast is one of the first things to talk about. Yom Kippur is a floating holiday. It depends on the Jewish calendar. This year it begins on Wednesday, September 15th at sundown, and it ends on Thursday the 16th at sundown. At the completion, I believe, of sundown on that day. So it's considered a 25-hour fast. And during that time, the idea here again is that we are cleansing the body and the spirit by atoning and abstaining from food. It's also important in a lot of when you're looking at Judaic culture that this is not considered a punishment. This isn't, while you might have discomfort in the body, which is meant to remind you of the discomfort you may or may not have caused others with what you're atoning for. Yes, it is a reminder, but it's not considered a punishment. It's not a corporeal punishment. So it's not meant to be in those terms, but it is considered a sacrifice. And one of the ways that it is observed on Yom Kippur in order to fully observe the day. There are other abstains, things that you might abstain from that day. You're also going to refrain from work. So the idea here with all of the next ones we're talking about is we are beginning to kind of build in back to this as the theological texts we'll talk about. We're restoring the concept of Eden. So if the Garden of Eden, there's no work because there's no labor, everything's provided. You don't eat or drink because everything's provided without having to worry about that. You don't have to wear shoes, so you are supposed to refrain from wearing leather shoes in particular on Yom Kippur. And you're also going to abstain from bathing or washing, including perfumes and lotions. Again, the idea is that in this perfect state, we didn't need these things because we were still in a state where our bodies did not express such things. So again, we're trying to align ourselves to this concept. And it's also thought that by removing in a lot of the texts now when they look at the ritual, one of the things I noticed was they talk about really talking about the shoes and the bathing and the food as well. This is removing physical comforts from yourself and from your environment in a way that's going to also ideally help you reach that state of atonement where you realize what you've done wrong, your transgressions, and that you are helping to pay for those transgressions, not as a punishment, but as a physical recognition of what was once perfect and is now imperfect in this day, and that we seek to get ourselves back to as close as we can that perfect nature that we aspire to be. So that's pretty much, oh, one last thing that I forgot to have. I'm looking down at my notes as we talk. One last really big abstaining that you're supposed to do for Yom Kippur is sex. You're not supposed to have marital relations, to be more delicate about it, but basically no sex. Again, removing those physical comforts from your world in that day as another way of recognizing the gifts of what we have, what it means to do without them, and also how we could have had a perfect state of being at one point and not had to need these things. It's another aspect of it. So if that's something that's of interest to you, and you're not necessarily wanting to align yourself with a different belief system, but you do find these ideas interesting and you want to benefit from them. In other words, I'm not trying to ask people to convert to any particular belief system. I just like to lay out, as we said at the top, a lot of different cultures and religions and their beliefs in case they resonate for you, in case there's something from their rituals that you can adapt for yourself in a way that's personally meaningful also. So, if this is a time for you to come to a place of atonement, if there's something that's been weighing very heavily on your conscious that you've been carrying and it's been a labor for you to carry, this may be the exact time for you to create the space in your life to have that spiritual ritual, to know that there are many others who are also aligning themselves to these concepts during this time. If you subscribe to the idea that we share our emotional awareness with our consciousness, a global consciousness, then there is the idea that even if you are not of this faith, you might help celebrate the beliefs of this faith by knowing also that there are so many more whose faith this is an expression of, and they're also celebrating it with you. So, like I said, there's an alignment of intention on a global level, even if that means something for you. So I do give that to you, my friends, in case there's something that you need to move on from. In times past, there have definitely been years where I have gone through periods of atonement for what I was carrying with me, and gave myself personal rituals as well that were cleansing and meant to help me to rid myself of the guilt that I was carrying from some incidences, those kind of things. This is the moment. So it's time. We're not meant to carry guilt, we're meant to carry light and love. Guilt reminds us of what we love. So if there's something that's guilting you, that's hurting you on that deeper level, I invite you now to examine it, make amends for it, if make reparations if you can, but do find a way to settle it for yourself, because it is a way to go forward and start anew, which is so important for each one of us. Thank you for joining me today. And as we go forward in this week, I hope you continue to find answers, because we'll keep listening.